of the rock, or many traditions connected to Mount Moriah, where Abraham brought his son Isaac, the story of the mining of Isaac in Genesis 22, the story possibly of Jacob's dream, Genesis 28, the ladder touching heaven and earth. Later stories in the Bible connected this to King David has already conquered Jerusalem. 2 Samuel chapter 5, he buys the threshing floor of Aravna, the Jebusite. The end of 2 Samuel, thought to be this, his son, King Solomon. Right? What does it say about King Solomon besides building the temple? Where does it say he built the temple? 2 Chronicles chapter 3 talks about King Solomon builds the first temple in Jerusalem, here, on top of Mount Moriah. That's what the verse says. So, we'll talk about the Western Wall in a few minutes. Let's go to the time of King Solomon. Focus just on the temple, the perimeter. That'll be later, when the Temple Mount that we know today, where you were, was built later, during the time of King Herod, 1,000 years after King Solomon. So King Solomon, about 3,000 years ago, something like that, maybe a little less, builds the first temple. You'll notice the temple's facing east, but everybody around it is facing towards this room. This is where the Ark of the Covenant is kept. It says in the Talmud, the Jewish Code of Law, that the Ark of the Covenant is placed inside the room known as the Holy of Holies. It rested on the rock, which is still there underneath the dome of the rock. Okay? So, the most significant part of the temple, the only time it was entered, the back part of the temple, was on the Day of Atonement. Only by one person, the high priest at the time. He would pray for peace and forgiveness for everyone. People here, people everywhere. Of all things. So, that was King Solomon's temple. It stood for about 400 years, destroyed by the Babylonians, invading from the northeast, Babylon, central Iraq. The stories at the end of 2 Kings, 2 Chronicles, the exile. Psalm 137, by the rivers of Babylon. Those are the exilees stuck in Babylon waiting to come back. How do we know they want to come back? At the end of the song. If I forget the old Jerusalem, the idea is they came back, some of them, to rebuild the temple. So King Solomon's temple is 3,000 years ago, the second temple, built by the returnees. The stories in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, Zerubbabel, and then later the Ezra and Nehemiah come to visit. The temple's already been rebuilt. That's about 2,500 years ago. 500 years later, during the time of Herod, you've already been north, right? Were you in Caesarea? Okay. And what about Masada? South? Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. So, the time of Herod, people living in Qumran. People living in it. Okay. Great. It's also, were you there at least on a sunny day? Today, the rain outside, a little difficult. It's all the rain from on this side of the city. It's already down there. You can imagine what it's like. What you saw the flowing, like the streams in En-Gedi. Okay, so it's even more so today. It all goes down here. Okay. Where were we? King Solomon's temple. King's second temple. Time of Herod. Time of Herod. The big plaza surrounding the temple is going to be built, and the temple is going to be remodeled. This is about 2,000 years ago. Herod is building several things at the same time. So you were in Caesarea, the first deep water port in this part of the world, and right? You didn't go as far as Masada, but Masada is also under construction. We're talking around the year minus 20 BC, when all this remodeling begins. Okay, The second temple's been already standing for 500 years. It needs a little work. A building 500 years old doesn't need a little here and there, right? Okay. But it turns out it's a remodel. And the plaza, the idea of the plaza, building it surrounding the temple, so many more people could be up here. So, by pouring the mountain next to where the temple is, a very large platform surrounding the temple is built, the temple is remodeled, and there are other structures up here. I'm sure you'll be hearing about this structure later on today, the Antonia Fortress. But here, the building that has a lot of different names, the Royal Stoa Solomon's Portico, even though it's 1,000 years later, doesn't matter. It's like, harkens back to something that may have been up here as well. And the Royal Basilica, because it has a basilical shape. There have been pieces of this that have been discovered. It's recently been written about, even published in BAR. If some of you are familiar with BAR, Biblical Archaeological Review, it's a great way to get insights into what's going on, not just here. The authors write about other things in the world. There's many universities from all over that are here and other parts of the world doing archaeology. So, the Western Wall, 4 gates. They're outside. There's not much to see, but were the women in the women's section, or was it raining already when you came? You were there? Okay, so there's a little piece of this gate. It's not open. The only gate that's open today is this gate. On the other side of the bridge, but today it's not a bridge. The bridge is underneath it, like this piece. What we see here, we'll see more of the bridge. We're standing here underneath arch number 3. Arch number 3 of the bridge. That is over 300 feet long. Connects the upper city, the 3 of the 4 quarters today, to the most holy part of the city. Okay. We'll be passing by this gate later on in the tour. We're going to be walking along the archways here, going underneath the second to the last arch, and walking all the way along the western wall to the very end. The temple, not long after the remodel, during Herod's time, it's destroyed in the year 70. During the Roman siege on Jerusalem, there's a very big question. What was here before, between the time that the temple was destroyed and the time the Dome of the Rock is built in the year 691? If there was anything else here, because there's certainly many structures on Mount of Olives, churches that were built. There are churches here in the Old City. Then it wasn't really called the Old City, but okay. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Holy Basilica on Mount Zion, other ones. So, open question. Since there's physically no archaeology on the Temple Mount, only around, it might take a long time to figure it all out. Okay. The next big change. Actually, I don't have all the pieces that go up here, but you already know, since you were there on the Temple Mount, that there are many things here. Some built around the year 700, like this, the Dome of the Rock, a little before the year 700, the Al-Aqsa Mosque just after the year 700, but there are many other buildings here that you probably saw. You probably heard a lot about them already. The next big change that's going to affect us right now, around the year 1300, many homes are built in the valley here that separates. It did separate the Temple Mount from the upper city. By the time, around the year 1300, that many of these buildings, which are going to make up the Muslim quarter today, are built. The city already has 3 other areas: the Jewish quarter, the Christian quarter, and behind the Jewish quarter, the Armenian quarter. So, in order to walk along the bridge, which has also been built over, so we'll see just outside here, and walk down to the Western Wall, we are going to walk underneath all that, basically. Going to the Western Wall. We will always be on the same side of the Western Wall, not on the other side, where you were already. You were on the other side, over here. You were on the Temple Mount, you saw the other side. walking around up here. But we are always going to be on this side. We're basically walking along the outside. Doesn't look like it's the outside. And we're not necessarily underground. We are just underneath the foundation. And you'll feel like you're underground because there are things on top of you. So before we continue, are there any questions?
Just to clarify, so
Yes.
this tour, we're going to be under all of that.
Under here, we're coming down here to the western wall.
Yeah.
Basically, we're walking on the same line all the way along to the building. Yeah, we're underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it built in that particular shape?
Wait, this?
No, the Temple Mount.
Oh, the Dome of the Rock. Okay. There are a lot of interesting theories about the Dome of the Rock. One is, were you at St. Peter's in Capernaum? St. Peter's, it's a church.
It's one of the mother-in-laws. Waiting outside what we saw.
You saw it, okay. It's a shape of an octagon. So it's not necessarily that shape that gave influence to the Dome of the Rock. Down the street, literally, on the way to Bethlehem, is a building shaped like this. The only thing that's left is the floor. It's known as the Katisma, which means the seat, where Mary rested on her way from Jerusalem to Bethlehem before she gave birth to Jesus. So, the octagon. It exists about 100 years before this. Here's the thing. Many architects see different buildings and they say, if that works, great idea. But what's the innovation of the Dome of the Rock? The innovation is most churches at the time that were built, the mosaics or the art is on the inside. Here, everything's on the outside. I mean, there's stuff on the inside too. But basically, the idea of putting it all, the mosaic tiles on the outside, that's the innovation of this. Why this was built, somebody just wrote an article and said, it lines up sort of with the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, but the builders had in mind a monument that would rival another monument. The what's known as Hagia Sophia, or today Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. It was a church. They've actually done restoration and found the original, some of the original paintings. I saw a National Geographic special about a year ago that talked about it. And the dynasty here at the time said, it's not just the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It is, the seat of the Byzantine Emperor is Hagia Sophia. So we are going to build a building that's going to compete with that. That's what this latest article that's been published of why this was built, the shape they talk about, also the influence of the buildings beforehand. Okay, and one more thing about building. Builders are not just men. In Jerusalem, there are many women that are building as well. First, before Herod's time, we have the Maccabees. There's a very important Maccabean queen, Salome, Samsona Manka. There's also a woman 500 years later. I mentioned the Byzantine Empire, Hagia Sophia, Constantinople, Istanbul. Who is sitting there? Not just Theodosius II. The empress, Eudokia. She comes to Jerusalem. She reads in the book of Psalms, Psalm 51. It's very moving, very interesting story. It's about David and Bathsheba. The end of the psalm says, come to Jerusalem, beautify the city, and build the city walls. She says, I have an idea. Tells her husband, Theodosius II, I'm going to build. That's what it says here. This is what we have to do. You send the money. That's what happened. Her wall, outside of the Davidson Center, Eudokia's wall. I don't know if you got down to the very bottom there. It's there. There's a sign, not an inscription, but we know she built it. Outside the Damascus Gate, Saint Etienne Church, a convent. She also built that too. So men and women are part of this endeavor, building together. Okay. Anything else?
Built by slaves.
Okay. Here's the thing. I don't think she's here today, but we have someone here doing a doctoral dissertation She's one of the guys that works here, and she says she hasn't published anything yet. But it seems like there are people that you would call slaves, but you will see masonry work on the Western Wall that could not have been done by an unskilled person. Highly skilled, just the opposite. You had to pay people to do that kind of work. So, most likely a combination, but we don't know until she finishes her doctorate and says, okay, 99% slaves or 50% slaves. She's trying to figure it all out. Okay. Anything else? Good. So I'll put this back for the next, and we'll take a walk. We're going to